Hi everyone, it's Terminator here again. How are you all? I hope you're all well. The video I'm about to present is a video about a question I received, and the question I was asked was why do I think veteran units are useless? Well, that's a very good question, and I hope this goes some way to explain my thoughts anyway. So let's see how we go. Now, before we get on to that, let's just look at, firstly, retainers. Now, retainers have a global effect on particular unit types, say like swords, or even broader categories like melee type infantry. And ideally, these affect more than one particular unit. Retainers are, in my opinion anyway, probably the one aspect of this game that is more valuable to your army build than anything else. You know, these are critical. These have huge impacts on the types of builds you use and also how you play with those units in the game. Okay, so veteran units are sort of a little bit different, or I should say they're probably a lot different, because veteran units, each upgrade costs you like 50, and it only affects one unit. Okay, and it only affects, you know, one sort of aspect of that unit. So 50, in my view, is really not such a good trade-off. Okay, now let's just have a look at like a particular unit and see how this all pans out. Now, say the Longsword Ashigaru unit, right? Now, let's have a look at the options for this particular unit. You can upgrade melee attack, melee defense, the charge bonus, morale, fatigue, even speed, and for each of these, you know, you've got maybe a couple of slots for each of them. These sort of cost you $50 per slot. Okay, so straight up, I think you could probably eliminate some of these, because that 50 probably isn't worth that particular upgrade. Like, say, speed for that particular unit isn't probably critical or very useful, so to spend an extra 50 on something like that isn't probably such a good idea. Okay, if you look at the cost of the unit, okay, it's about 350. Now, the extra 50 actually increases the cost of the unit by 12.5%. Now, a lot of these buffs that you use for like your veteran upgrades, you know, say for like attack, is only a 10% buff, and if you look at like maybe charge, it's about 25%. You know, speed, you get about 50% buff. You know, so you got to sort of weigh this all up, saying, well, you know, the more units I buff, the smaller the army I'm going to be able to bring usually, and for that 12.5% increase, is it worth buffing something like speed by 50% for that particular unit, or even like the charge, increasing it by 25? You got to say, well, maybe not. Okay, but for that particular unit, there is one sort of upgrade you might want to look at, and that's sort of defense, and that's a 50% buff. So yeah, you might want to think about that. But again, the big problem is that all these small buffs give you a potential bigger problem, in that you're going to bring smaller and smaller armies. Now, on small funds, this is going to be a huge problem. Medium funds, it's still a problem, but you may get away with it. And on large funds, yeah, there may be an argument there to say that you know, you're going to be able to bring a fairly decent army with a bit of funds left over, so yeah, you might want to buff a few, you know, units. But overall, you know, a lot of focus people put on upgrades, and they're probably not a lot you're going to get out of it. Okay, look, even the Naginata, say that's another one that costs a lot more. Okay, the cost increase is only about 6% from your original base unit cost, but when you look at some of the upgrades, like it's only an 8% buff for charge, a 12% buff for attack. You know, these aren't huge increases for that extra sort of outlay. So I try and steer away from it, but look, I accept the fact that some people might say that, yeah, this is still a bit of an advantage, but it's only very slight, and I just sort of question, the time and effort people put into that. I think, yeah, it looks good, you can change the name, but you can change the name without actually upgrading it and wasting an extra $50 in my view. Because like if you spend or upgrade 7 units or something like that, that's extra $350. You could have brought a whole extra unit of like the Yari Ashigaru. Okay, so not necessarily good value. So what do we do? Okay, well, first thing to think of is upgrades aren't probably going to win you battles. They might slightly help, but retainers are the things that are definitely going to give you a huge advantage. Getting them right is more important than worrying about upgrades. So look, if you want to try using veteran upgrades, look, use it just for like large funds. You can bring 20 good units and you got that little bit of extra cash and you can upgrade a few units, and that and there are some nice buffs out there, don't get me wrong. Okay, and I would use the following as a guide anyway when you're looking at veteran units, and this might help you all choose sort of what you think you should buff, or give you a bit more info as to what you should buff anyway. Okay, so any unit that basically has a cost of between 350 to 600, okay, you can pretty much guarantee any buff that you want to do, if it's got a value of 4 or below, that's going to be a good buff. It's going to give you a good percentage bonus for a relatively small upgrade cost. Okay, so that could be something you want to think of. Okay, so again, units of say 750, 1000, anything below a value of say 7 is probably going to be a good buff. So if there are any stats there you want to buff, if it's 7 or below, by buffing that particular stat, it's going to be good value. Okay, so that's sort of the way I look at it. So you can go through all your units, and if you think along those lines, that at least you're getting a good buff in return. Okay, if you think that buff is going to be useful in battle. Okay, so give that a bit of a try. But another thing, even to break it down even more simpler, okay, I've given you I'll give you a list of say some units, right? So Yari Samurai, if you have a look at their melee attack is 6. The cost of the unit is 700. So in my view, buffing the melee attack is actually good, so you might want to look at that. Now, this should make it really simple for you to actually do this. If you look at Yari Ashigaru, Naginata Samurai, Lone Sword Ashigaru, Katana Samurai, Light Cav, Yari Cav, Katana Cav, all of those units I've just listed, all of their defense stats fall within my sort of recommendation for buffing. So have a look at those sort of units, and if you want to buff anything, buff the defensive stat, okay, because that's really good value. Okay, so yep, I don't like veteran units that much. I do think that they're kind of useless, but again, that's just a personal view. If you want to buff, have a look at the defense stats for some of these units, and you'll see that the percentage increase is actually quite worthwhile. Okay, so that's it for me. I hope that sort of made sense, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, guys.